I've recently gone back to therapy and it's been great for my coaching actually. There are things that I'm learning and there are things that I already knew but haven't properly internalized. So in this video, I really want to unpack why therapy, what we can learn from therapy as coaches, and how it's been actually improving my coaching. So you can hopefully take those insights in, reflect on your own supportive spaces, and of course, we'll touch on the old age topic of coaching versus therapy. I've been in supervision as a practicing coach for about 7 years now, and I've also been coached on and off on things like business, entrepreneurial mindset, and leadership. Because as independent coaches, it's not enough for us to just be a qualified coach. We need to train that business muscle as well to make our work visible, to know how to price and package our services so that people know how to buy them and be supported by our coaching, which is a topic for a whole other video. Basically, I'm no stranger to deep inner work and go into supportive, reflective spaces where I can deepen my self-understanding and self-mastery, which in return deepens my coaching presence. As coaches, though, we are so used to holding space for others, but sometimes what we really need is someone to hold space for us. And for me, the decision to return to therapy felt like a gentle act of care and actually emotional maturity, and a reminder that I too get to be supported, even if things look fine on the outside, even if I know how to self-reflect, and even if I should know what I'm doing by now. Because the truth is, we are never a done deal. We're constantly learning, and we don't need to wait for things to feel broken to seek support. Sometimes we return to therapy or other supportive spaces simply because our inner world needs a witness, deserves a witness. And that's actually the irony of me going to therapy now, because it's not because something is significantly wrong in my life, actually the opposite, because everything is going really well. But I suddenly started having flashbacks from the past, and there was a couple of painful memories that came back to me in my dreams, on top of uncharacteristic dips in my motivation and focus I've been experiencing recently. So just to give you a bit of a flavor of what motivated me to seek therapy at this point in my life. I'll tell you more about my personal experience closer to the end of this video, so stick around if it's interesting. But for now, let's move on to more practical things. There's still a lot of stigma around being a therapy client, as if something must be fundamentally wrong with you if you go to therapy, like you must be emotionally or mentally unstable. And while, yes, therapy can support people experiencing mental health crisis or clinical diagnosis, that's not the only reason someone might seek it out. When I did my coach training back in 2018, the distinction between coaching and therapy was explained like this. Basically, therapy helps take someone from -1 to 0, and coaching moves them from 0 to +1 and beyond. And by 0, I mean functioning well in life, generally self-aware, but dealing with unhelpful thoughts or patterns that don't necessarily require a clinical diagnosis like PTSD, depression, schizophrenia, or another mental health disorder. So in that model, coaching is about moving from good to great. So let's dive into how going back to therapy is changing how I show up as a coach. Well, first of all, it's deepening my capacity to be with discomfort, my own and also my clients'. Secondly, it's made me more sensitive to the emotional weight that people carry into our sessions and how tender some of those edges really are. And thirdly, it's also reminded me of the quiet boundary between therapy and coaching and why that distinction matters, and how easy it can be actually to blur that line when we care deeply and when we want to help. So let's dive deeper into each one of these. I've always been, I believe, quite comfortable with my clients' discomfort, which is a valuable skill for any coach, because every time a client moves from point A to point B, there is going to be that messy middle to navigate. And that often looks like changing habits, trying new things, taking unfamiliar steps, which can feel really uncomfortable precisely because it is unfamiliar. And it pulls people outside of their comfort zone. But when a coach isn't fully comfortable with a client's discomfort, they might unintentionally rescue the client by offering solutions or advice or tips. They might lean into more support, more than usual, and pull back from challenge. And we know that good coaching is challenging by definition, to help our clients expand into the new ways of thinking and behaving that are more true to them, and to be able to create an appropriate perspective shift. So without challenge, coaching can become quite one-dimensional and a bit too cheerleading. So often coaches may even collude with their client by avoiding disruption and not really questioning the client's worldview with curiosity or presence. What therapy taught me is not just to be with my client's discomfort, but to actually be more patient with it. And as coaches, we can sometimes feel that subtle pressure around our client's progress. It's something that often comes up in supervision. Is my client progressing fast enough? They didn't do what they said they would. Does that mean my coaching isn't working? And I love that coaches can bring this sort of questions into supervision because it gives them a chance to look inward and ask, what's going on for me that makes me feel this pressure? And why do I have an agenda for my client's timeline? This reflection is really where so much growth can happen. My next insight is around being more sensitive to the emotional load my clients might carry. My coaching is deeply relational, which is why I've never really used a rigid framework or steps that I walk my clients through when we work together. Our first session is always 2 hours long and focused on contracting, and that's what builds that foundation, the trust and the depth that we need to have in order to do good work together. But being back in therapy really has deepened my attunement. It's given me that full permission to slow down, do less, and actually offer way more space to my clients. Now, I've sort of done that before, but the difference is I now do it with more intention, with no hesitation, no second guessing, like truly trusting the process. And that shift didn't just come from therapy. It came from being on the receiving end of the support that I hope to deliver. That in itself has been such a powerful insight for me personally, because there's so much value in experiential learning. And as coaches, we often kind of lose sight of it because we start typically with a training program, then we read the books, then we watch all coaching demos that we can get our hands on. We consume all the frameworks. We almost like looking for miraculous coaching framework, like that one thing that we can always use and it will always yield great results. But a few years in, as we become more experienced, we begin to realize that not all our learning will come from coaching specific spaces. We can learn from fiction. We can learn from nature. We can learn from being supported ourselves. Honestly, I've learned so much about the intricacies of the mother wound healing process and also the emotional impact of negative feedback for us coaches from a fiction book. This one, Schopenhauer Cure, which was recommended to me by one of my supervisors. And I learned more from this book than I could have learned from, say, a coaching article. I'll link this book below so that you can give it a read if you want to. There's something about the difference between coaching and therapy that got me thinking that sometimes as coaches, especially at the beginning, but oftentimes during pivot or a season of change, we can almost lose sight of the most fundamental thing and quality that helps our clients to progress in lives, which might be not linear and it might not make sense, but it's almost like moving away from or holding lightly the technical part of the coaching process and never forget to bring your humanity, your humanness into the space. So sometimes as coaches, I think we need that permission slip to be a little more human in our conversations, especially when our clients bring something tender or vulnerable, something deep and potentially heavy, which can disarm us, which can take us aback a little bit and leave us wondering how to be with all the sensitivity and vulnerability in this space, especially in cases where, we work with clients who are typically switched on. They are on top of things. They're energized. They have that uplifting joie de vivre, ready to do stuff. And then suddenly something happens and they surprise us with the depth of the material that they are bringing. So sometimes well-intentioned coaches can rush into helping the client reframe their experience, what they went through, something that they remembered. They want to extract the learning or find a silver lining or redirect their clients toward gratitude. And sure, there is a place for that. And I know this move is often well-intentioned. But here's the question to pause with. Who really needs this reframe? Is the client ready to move on? Or are they still needing to feel what's here, fully and without pressure? Because here's the truth. We are not just aha moments machines with cute open-ended questions always at the ready. As coaches, when sensitive topics enter the room, when a client reflects inward and shares something from their past, like how a situation with their boss reminds them of how helpless they felt growing up, or how they've never felt good enough, as so no matter how many promotions they get, there's still that void, or how they were never praised by their parents and all their achievements were just taken for granted. In those moments, the best thing we can do might be just to let the human behind the coach step forward and say something simple and real like, that must have felt really tough, or that sounds incredibly lonely, and just pause and let the silence do the heavy lifting, as coaches often say. Allow yourself and the client just be with that moment without rushing to the next question or trying to extract the learning or offer a reframe. Sometimes that's what makes all the difference, really, just simply being with your clients in a very present, human way. So let's talk about the difference between coaching and therapy. This is always such a juicy topic. It never goes away. I've been a coach for 7 years now. It's always present, and I think it's good that we're having those conversations so that we are aware of our respective strengths and limitations, just to really figure out at what point in our client's journey our support is the best intervention for them. Because sometimes we need therapy, sometimes we need coaching, sometimes we need a bit of both. So what's the difference? Coaching is very forward focused. It's goal oriented, it's resourcing, and therapy is healing work. It's about processing trauma and going back, working with deeper emotional material and building safety from the inside out. Both are valuable and sometimes both are needed, especially if your clients are navigating grief, trauma histories, burnout, or big transitions. And let's be clear about something. Being trauma informed as a coach doesn't mean that you're treating trauma. It means that you're aware that the trauma can show up, that it can shape behaviors, patterns, and reactions, and how we can approach it with sensitivity and care. One of the simplest ways to discern whether therapy or coaching is more appropriate is to look at the client's core desire. So coaches very often ask themselves this question: is it therapy stuff? Should I be working with this client going forward, or should I have a referral conversation? And as a starting point, it is useful to look at the client's core desire. If the desire is to understand why they are the way they are, therapy may be better suited. So if the client tells you, I just want to figure out why I am the way I am, why I have this tendency, why I behave in such a way, why I think this way. If the core desire is to understand, then I think therapy could be a better option here. However, if the desire is to create change, for example, I'd like to become more aware of what might be going on so that I can feel more confident when I apply for this promotion, or when I reach out to this person, or in my relationships, or so that I feel calmer, so that I can get what I want to get, then coaching might be the right place, with, of course, a trauma-sensitive presence if and where needed. Trauma-informed coaching isn't about purposefully regressing our clients into their past. We're not asking them, tell me what happened to you when you were 3 or 7. But if a client takes us there, then we meet them there with presence and warmth and mainly curiosity. We say, tell me more, and what feels like it needs to be voiced. And then when it feels right, reflect back what you're sensing. Let the client know how their words landed with you. Let them know that you're listening, that you're here. And even though they might be doing the uncomfortable work, it is still safe to do it, and that they're safe in your presence. Because we heal in relationships. And the quality of your presence as a coach, the safety you offer in those moments, can be incredibly healing. Even if you don't know the full map of their trauma history, even if you're just coaching, because presence itself can be such a powerful medicine. That being said, let's talk about referral conversations. So, knowing when to refer and how to do it gracefully. One of the things I help coaches explore in supervision is this exact dilemma. Something feels deeper here, and am I still coaching? Or is this asking for something else? Maybe your client keeps slipping in emotional distress, or you're sensing unprocessed grief, trauma, or anxiety that feels out of reach for your coaching tools. Or perhaps the space just feels heavier than usual and your client isn't moving forward. They're just circling. So that's usually a cue that something else might be needed. And I know this moment can feel awkward and slightly uncomfortable. You might worry about saying the wrong thing or hurting the relationship. You really don't want to come off as rejecting or cold. But what's important to remember is that a graceful and well-timed referral isn't rejection. It's an act of care and a way of honoring the depth of what's showing up. One thing I feel is really important to share is this. When a client opens up and shares something distressing, and the coach immediately responds with, oh, well, we don't talk about trauma and coaching. This isn't what coaching is for. You need a therapist for that. That can actually be quite harmful for the coaching relationship, particularly when done as a knee-jerk reaction to what's just been said. To the client, that moment might land as dismissal, as rejection sometimes, as if their honesty was too much. And yes, technically, you may be doing the right thing as a coach by referring. But if the timing isn't thoughtful, if the tone isn't relational, it can feel like you've taken away their autonomy. And if the client has a history of abuse, manipulation, or powerlessness, that kind of rupture can feel almost re-traumatizing. I know it's a strong word, but I'm going to use it for the sake of this video. So here's the distinction. Ethical coaching isn't about avoiding the past at all costs. It's not about making the coaching space tidy and safe for us coaches by steering clear of anything messy. Ethical coaching is about knowing how to receive your client when they feel safe enough to reveal something vulnerable. It's about being able to stay present, grounded, and within the circle of your competence. It's about knowing when a referral is appropriate and how to frame it not as a rejection, but as a recontracting dialogue. A conversation held safely, delivered ethically, and offered with care. And also, coaching sensitive topics ethically isn't about knowing everything there is to know about trauma-informed coaches and coaching and all the techniques, but to rather normalize that questions are okay, that some clients might impact you differently than others, and it's okay to bring your thoughts and worries to supervision, to unpack what's going on for you as you meet and hold space for someone else's deep emotional stuff. Having concerns, questions, and wanting to unpack certain things, no matter how knowledgeable, experienced, and qualified you are, doesn't make you a bad coach. It actually, the opposite is true. It makes you a great coach if you're willing to learn from your clients and integrate, actually, that experiential learning. Okay, personal reflections real quick. I'm not sure if anyone's really interested, so I'll keep it sweet and short, but also I'll spill the tea. A few weeks ago, I had an uncharacteristic, I would say, dip in motivation and focus. I just couldn't physically bring myself to doing my normal business activities in terms of writing and responding to queries. I also I had a couple of teary moments that caught me off guard, and two painful memories from my teenage years suddenly surfaced, and both of them came to me in my dreams, which I found fascinating. Never ever something like this happened to me before. And I think the main thing why I sort of within myself, I knew that therapy was the right call, because I just really wanted to understand what's going on with me. I'm a huge fan of coaching. I'm a huge fan of supervision, and supervision comes from therapy. So I always felt like I was getting like this deeper work on myself and with all parts of myself in supervision. But this time it was so difficult for me even to articulate what is it that I want to change. And it's this kind of struggle to verbalize my A to B journey and the transformation that I want to see. Kind of told me that my core desire is understanding. My core desire is that I want to go back and see what's going on for me. And that's why I chose therapy, and that's why it felt like the right call for me. What I'm also learning in therapy now is the idea that we move through life collecting experiences, many of which are frustrating, emotionally charged, or even quietly damaging. And often we don't know how to process them in the moment as they're occurring. Maybe we didn't feel safe enough to share what was going on. Maybe our parents, partners, or friends weren't understandably equipped to support us. So those experiences often stay tucked away, potentially held in the body, buried by the psyche to protect us. And then one day, when things are stable, calm, and good, the psyche says, now you're ready to look at this. You're strong enough to feel it. And that's what seems to be happening to me right now. And I'm not saying this is the universal experience for everybody, but it's certainly mine. And it's also what I've seen in some of my coaching clients. And it's what I'm currently unpacking with my therapist. I wanted to share that with you in case you're going through something similar. Maybe you've been considering therapy. Maybe you want to know why some of your clients might benefit from seeking therapy as well. Maybe you've been feeling a little off lately, less motivated, less focused, even though things are really looking good in your life. So what I want to say, and it's something that I needed to tell myself as well, is that you're not crazy. You're not ungrateful. You're not making it up. And I'll be honest, I felt like a real wave of shame when apathy and distraction crept in. I felt really guilty for feeling low when everything around me was objectively good. Like, I live in London, even though I was born in a former Soviet country. I've been in a loving marriage for 11 years, even though I came from a broken home. I have two amazing kids, and I'm becoming the kind of mom that I always hoped to be, even though I didn't always have that model growing up. I love what I do for a living, even though I spent nearly a decade in banking, stuck in an industry that felt so misaligned after studying economics at university. So yes, life is good. I'm 36, and I feel like I've done a lot. And actually, I still feel so young, like life is just beginning. There's this famous quote by Carl Jung, life really begins at 40. Until then, you're just doing research, and I really love this. Here's what I know now, and not just intellectually know, but also know at this deeper body-based level as I journey through it myself, that how we feel is how we feel. And when there is no clear external reason to feel that way, the reason is likely internal. And sometimes our psyche chooses the best chapter of our life so far as the moment to bring something painful back up for resolution. So I'm trying to take it as a compliment, really, as well as sort of soften my feelings of guilt and shame for not being to just get over it. I was born in the Soviet Union. Depression, anxiety, that was for aristocrats. Like for us, it was just like, oh, you have too much time in your hands. Just get over it. So that was a little bit about me, and I hope it was useful for some of you. I want to close today with a reflection and an invitation. If you're a coach who's been carrying a lot, whether it's client energy, self-doubt, emotional fatigue, or just the quiet pressure to keep it all together, please remember you're allowed to access support too, not just in crisis, but as a form of maintenance, of devotion, of professionalism. Therapy, supervision, intervision, journaling, these aren't signs of weakness or like you are in need of support. They're part of the fabric of what makes you strong. So maybe ask yourself, where in my practice do I need more support? What's asking to be witnessed in me right now? And where might I be crossing the line between care and over-responsibility? And if these kinds of questions feel deep, thought-provoking yet nourishing, if you're craving a space to unpack, reflect, and grow, this channel is for you. I'm so glad you're here. And if you ever want to go deeper, I'd love to support you through a group or one-to-one supervision. You'll find all the links below. Take good care of yourself, and I'll see you in my next one.